Welcome to Presente, a space and community that vibes on being in the moment, something we are relearning how to do in a fast moving world.
We are excited to be part of a growing movement that talks about topics that we feel haven't been talked about in our Latin culture and womanhood.
Be present with us. Take a pause and break down societal norms.
Redefine the meaning of existing. Welcome to Presente, the podcast.
On today's episode, we are discussing inner child healing and shadow work. And this conversation is going to go a little beyond Jissela and I, as we have our very first guest on Presente, author, writer, Tamika Burgess. I am super excited to have her on here. Please stay tuned. We're going to discuss our topic at hand and dive in a little deeper into her book, Sincerely Sicily. Thank you. Please stay tuned.
To heal is to breathe, and to acknowledge our healing can take us further. If you do, you break your soul free. Dear inner child, it was never your fault to begin with. But as adults, it is our responsibility to heal the shadow within us. If not, we cannot break free of the generational cycles before us. Today's episode may be tough for some to hear, but we hope that by being open about these two topics, you can begin to understand and reflect on the things from back then to help shape your present and your future self. For 2024, let's aim to unpack shadow work and inner child healing.
What is inner child healing? Hello, Presente listeners. Thank you for tuning in today to our episode on inner child healing and shadow work. I'll start off with inner child healing. It is to understand your needs, behaviors, traits you possess. It is understanding that, being aware of it as an adult, and providing for your inner child, because you may not know it, but it is important not to lose sight of your inner child, but to embrace your inner child. And we'll discuss further along about why it is important. Once you can understand your own needs from way back when you were a kid, it pretty much helps layer back all the either broken pieces or missing pieces or pieces within yourself that you don't seem to comprehend. And you're able to move forward in a way where you're embracing it by being aware of it and attending to it. It is totally fine and okay as an adult to reflect on that. After all, it is your life, and why not make it a much more worthwhile experience in understanding yourself and why you do certain things or why not, right? With your inner child, I would like to say that you ever heard of the phrase of don't grow up, it's a trap?
Yeah.
I think that we growing up, even kids in today's world, everything is obviously of separation, like you got to be 18 and over to drink, or no, not drink, to smoke legally, 21 and over to drink, or to maybe go to a nightclub or any place in the world, maybe it's an adults only kind of thing. So I get it where there's that sense of separation, and that does apply with many serious things that you ought to, take precaution in, like drinking or driving, doing drugs. So I get that. But it is okay to intertwine the two when you are looking into your inner child, because by doing that, you can reflect and find, closure in that gap. Don't grow up. It is a trap, because when you lose your inner child, it's like we're losing some piece of us, the magic within us that we're actually born with, due to the fact that as adults, we're like on this hamster wheel of what reality is, where society places us by working a 9 to 5, by being parents, by maybe, pursuing some type of education or career. We tend to lose sight of that if it's not in alignment with our purpose or with something that actually makes us happy. I think that many people, as they get older, and one of our past episodes was adulting, and it's as if, hey, you've hit that 20-year-old mark, that's it, like you're an adult, you can no longer do, kiddie stuff. And I beg to defer with that, because it's okay to carry on some of those childlike traits. Certain things may be out of the norm, and I guess people, also place the in their head like the criticism, and that's hard to live with, absolutely. But when you can intertwine, like your child joys of life to even your adulthood, I mean, it just makes you feel whole. You feel comfortable. You feel like a kid again. And I think that's fine. I think that we place too much emphasis sometimes that, you're an adult, you got to be in like, a suit all the time, like in this armored suit of being an adult. Don't lose sight of that. It is a trap, because when you do lose sight of it, of your inner child, you become unhappy and bitter. That just creates a whole other like thick layer of being pessimistic, not seeing like the lighter side of things. As we know, when you are on the lighter side of things, it just feels better. You're in a much better place mentally, perhaps even physically, on an emotional wave. It just plays a better role for yourself and the way you are with others. So once again, don't grow up. It is a trap. Some of the reasons why is because as a kid, I remember the days where, being a kid, you lived so freely, like there weren't any deadlines or any financial burdens or burdens of any sort, or heartbreaks, or even having to consider as, your mental health and the worries that come with it. Being a kid really sparks like this magic and profound energy within you that really just makes it much more lively to live in. Don't lose sight of your inner child. I think those were the days where, your curiosity stems from your dreams, the fun side of you. And that's also a beautiful side to have. We're not just a one way layered like path, like this is how we ought to be. We're not robots. So your inner child is definitely like something to hold on to. For instance, I'm an adult and I still enjoy having my ice cream late nights. And on summer days, any day, honestly. And it makes me happy, especially like when you're on vacation. I love going to different places where I can like try their ice cream or their gelato. And even what's the other thing I like? Frozen yogurt. Oh my God, I love it. And I love picking the toppings. Those are like just an example of what I mean by not losing your inner child and the bubbly side of you. It just brings a much more adventurous and fun, energetic side of you. Whereas as an adult, I think there's just too much going on in this world, and we don't want to get too caught up in that. We want to be on a lighter note. When I reflect on my upbringing, I had a really nice childhood, very loving, always with family. Got to travel, go to my country many, many times. Went to a really good school, have made really good friendships and good teachers and so forth. But one thing that I still string on to even to this day, it doesn't affect me, I think, as much as it did back then. But my social life was really much only like family and the friends at school. Outside of that, it wasn't like I was able to partake in any extracurricular activities, be part of any club or anything like that. It was always just school. Education was always first, as well as family, the house. But when it came to just, like learning new things, that wasn't always so much the case unless it was part of the curriculum at school. So like I do recall being able to go like swimming while I was in elementary school. We had like swim classes, we had chorus, we had dance classes. So those were the only times that I was able to like incorporate myself in these things. The same as I got older into middle school and high school. Some classes there with dancing and step. I love step. And those are things that if I wanted to do it after school on the weekends, or hey, sign me up because for a talent show, like whatever it was, all of that was always off limits for me. It was so I only got to enjoy it during class periods. That was it. I only got to enjoy it then. It used to upset me. It really did. It used to upset me very much because it was like a tease in a way, or it was out of the question. If I wanted to take on singing classes, if I wanted to find a studio to go sing and shout and all that, I couldn't. And I get it where money was an issue, you know, having to make ends meet and working hard. But sometimes it was like for my mom, I get it. It was working hard and pretty much no play. For a long time, that didn't resonate well with me. I used to think that that wasn't fair. I used to think that, you know, you're in a way robbing me from my talents or my gifts, or hey, you know, I always wanted to be a singer. You know, I have many idols, you know, from Selena and Mariah Carey, Toni Braxton, Whitney Houston. Like I was like, I want to be like them so bad. And I just never got to even experience it as much, like as a solo like artist. Just, you know, if I did it was fun and games at home. My dad, he was always trying to, you know, kind of lead with that, but it never went beyond that, never did. And I feel like that's one of my regrets. If I had to, I know they say live life with no regrets, and it's not like a major regret, like, oh my God, you know, I resent it, but it is something that I'm like, you know what, it's a shame. I could have probably been a really big mega superstar, I don't know, but you know, my shyness went into effect. I was fearful, like all these other things then started occurring where singing, like I just started moving away from it. And it's something that honestly brings me a lot of joy and happiness. That's a piece of my inner child that I feel like I let down. So to make up for it, now that I'm an adult, you know, I'm very well aware of it. I do still sing. I sing all the time by myself, not necessarily recording myself. I've tried it though. I find other ways to kind of make up for it through narrating audiobooks to our podcast right now and being an on-air host. So I'm finding other ways to pretty much make up for it. This is me now as an adult pursuing my dreams, pursuing things that I do have an interest in and a love for and curiosity for and I'm passionate about. But as a child, it was very much like what's best for you versus just being yourself. And I was very sheltered to that outside
Yeah.
world.
Thank you for sharing with us your inner child magic. I love that. I love that you had and still have a very creative inner soul that you would like to bring to light more. And honestly, you never know in this big world that we live in. As long as it's in your brain and in your heart, I feel like you said this before in another episode, it can still happen. You know, again, never say never. For those in Presente that are listening, me and Jennifer, we love watching tarot reader Vanessa Samaya on YouTube. And most recently, in her up to date videos, she was talking about how she was in the verge of choosing between therapy or singing lessons because this is something she also used to do a lot when she was a child. But again, you know, sometimes with our families or with society, you know, they want us to adapt to societal play, and sometimes that can repress what our creative gifts are. So she actually, instead of ended up choosing therapy, she ended up choosing singing lessons. I really found, you know, your connection about talking about it and then her connection with it. I think you should definitely go for it.
Thank you.
Definitely. Yes, definitely go for that. And I think you should connect with that, I want to say something. Inner child healing is, yes, putting light on the magic that is within you. And I want to say, as our adult selves, we have the power, because screw society, because we have the power to bring about those inner deep treasures and evolve them as we get older. So Jennifer, if it's in your heart, then you should definitely, consider going for that route if it's still there. And, I hope that Vanessa Samaya, if you do listen to our podcast, you've encouraged my friend over here to pursue that side of her as well, because our voices can shift into many different forms of communication, and singing is definitely very therapeutic. I myself also do like to sing. I actually do it on days, I feel like on days that I feel very much on heavy emotional load on my back. And then I just sit down and I just put a YouTube video and then just look for songs that are in common with the feelings that I'm having. Life can be so unpredictable, but we are the creators of our own life, and we have the ability to shift into those parts of ourselves that we thought we had to hide. But it's 2024, it's the magic 8 number, and I would say, like, even if we're afraid, let's do it afraid anyway. And you just never know what can come out of this life. So definitely, pursue that side of you, that your inner child, is still calling out to you, and, just go on with that.
What is your inner child?
Going into what is your inner child, the inner child is a combination of the adult and the child coming together to become one. It is the part of us as children we were maybe unable to process emotions or certain traumas that we faced, and messages from the past that we carry in our heart. It is our memories, our hopes and dreams for the future. So our inner child is the core's aspirations in life. Because when you're a child, there's this deep sense of you creating your own world and just freely putting into vision the world that you want to play in and the world that you want to see, and not really letting society stop you from that. But there comes a point where not only society, but sometimes within our own households, where it almost feels like the inner child's wings, or their wings are clipped off, and we have to, as we grow older, face the reality of the world, the physical world that we live in, and disassociate with our inner freedom that we had as children. Inner child healing is super important, but not everyone likes to do it because it's hard or scary to sit with the side of us that we do not like or we wish we could wash away. And this also ties into shadow work, which we'll talk on a little bit later. But healing can only happen if you unlock your heart and your inner self, and be willing to face the fact that some things in our past were not okay. Because sometimes what happens is, the more older that you get, there are certain things in life that can trigger us as adults, because these are things that we have not properly been able to manage, because maybe they were thrown back to us when we were children. When we grow, we might not have time to be able to process all of that trauma and experiences. I want to say, growing up in a Hispanic household in my own life, this is not something I feel like that was ever discussed about inner child healing or work. And in previous episodes, I had mentioned about how both of my parents were immigrants. My mother came from Honduras and my father came from Peru, both young, starting life over here in America. and acknowledging that our immigrant parents, had us young, and they had a lot to carry to take care of us as children. But in a way, they didn't have the time to process their own inner child healing because they immediately had responsibilities at home, whether it was to take care of us, their children, or to go to work and, try to adapt to living in a new country. I want to say inner child healing was something I became more aware about in my mid 20s, and then realizing what healing was, what understanding that what being human was, and not always putting logic to emotions, I want to say helped me along the way to be more compassionate and to continue being kind and putting some boundaries into place. And this idea of being liked by everyone, because the truth of the matter is our inner child, they want to be liked by everyone. The child wants to be liked by everyone. But as adults, we realize that, hey, we're not everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay. It's okay to have flaws. It's okay to be imperfect. It's part of the human process. What is not okay, however, is putting your reflections or unhealed part of the work you don't want to do onto others. I want to say when I was younger in my household, taking on any creative venture was seen more as a hobby, but it was always wise to pick something in a career field that was practical. And looking back on my cousins and even my brother, they all picked like careers in like engineering, and here I was picking a career in communications and media, and everybody questioned like, hey, can you find a job in that? Are you sure you want to do something in the more artistic side of media? Sometimes within our own families that can hurt us as we're still in our young 20s trying to figure out life. And the truth is I wished for someone to just be like, hey, I believe that you can do this as you get older, and put more light onto the creative side of our inner selves, because you never know what could blossom from that. But just putting something as simple as belief into somebody else. So in that way, I feel like within my own household, I had to do my own version of healing and finding, my worth, and hey, I am good enough with my own standards, and to continue improving on my life, because I'm not the type of person that I stop doing something just because someone, tries to put their reflections on me to them. I am the type of person that will try to push forward from those thoughts. And even if it still makes me feel a certain way deep down, I don't think my spirit gives up that easily. So I think this is why speaking on this topic, even now, is a little bit emotional for myself in terms of my inner child. What is shadow work? Shadow work is another topic that is not easy to talk about, but it is the process of exploring our inner darkness or the shadow within us. The shadow version is about getting uncomfortable with ourselves and learning how to heal the part of ourselves that we do not like to face. By ignoring our shadow for too long, we cannot find the light within us. It is possible to repress trauma, because these are heavy emotional parts of ourselves that were just too much when we were younger, or even as adults. Sometimes we repress certain things that can just weigh on us. And this can happen at any point of our life. Shadow work is, yes, the parts of ourselves that we don't like. I know that, at least for myself, there were moments that I want to say I caught myself and asked myself why, I respond to things in a certain way, or why I feel so guarded against certain things. I think that's just my shadow self coming out to let me know, like, hey, there are things that we have to discuss internally, and we have to just sit down with ourselves and going about it in different ways to kind of explore the reasons why we cannot stay the same throughout life, throughout our growth process. Because if you keep staying the same, then you'll never realize what can be on the other side, which is something I feel like is more abundant and more prosperous for yourself once you do go through the shadow work and once you explore more of what you don't like particularly about yourself. Because as great as we think that we each are, there are certain parts of ourselves that could improve, and they could be, we as a collective could be better in the way we go about being human and the way we go about being kind. And then naturally from there, we can form healthy boundaries with others. So something I guess I want to touch upon is boundaries play an important role as adults, especially when we express our boundaries to other people, especially in relationships, friendships, etc. I want to say that it is important to realize that boundaries don't mean that we do not need to still talk or that we do not not like each other. I think if there's a boundary that is expressed, you got to think, okay, hey, this person is coming out to me honestly and is saying, hey, I don't like this thing that you do, etc. And it's just a way to be aware of how we can progress in our relationships or how we can take them to the next evolution. Shadow work and inner child healing are all about evolving. So the more uncomfortable that you get when you tap into these emotions, the more growth you will see, the more healing you will have. In terms of my own family and shadow work, I know that, again, as I said earlier, our immigrant parents did not have time to explore the shadow parts about themselves. So again, it's important that we do the work as adults and we recognize, like, hey, not everything about us is perfect. There are things that we can do to help evolve ourselves for better in the future. Because sometimes what can happen, and we spoke about this on previous episodes, is when we don't take these measures and we have children can sometimes get affected by the things that we are as adults do not heal, because we're bringing past trauma or an unhealed version ourselves that has nothing to do with the children that are in front of you. This is necessary work, and it's necessary to say, hey, this is a part of myself that I could change, and or maybe not change it, but like ask yourself, is this helping anybody? Is this productive? Is this benefiting me? Is this growing me? All important questions while doing shadow work. And I'm going to let Jennifer talk about her shadow work. So Jennifer, when you're ready.
Shadow work is to recognize the parts of you that you don't like, the negative, the unlikable, the unacceptable side of you. It can be such things like your behaviors, traits, treatment to yourself, and even others. A quick example would be if you're someone who's always complaining and being pessimistic on the ongoing, always like just have a down, dark side to things. You're always falling into this constant negative mindset by default, but then you're always wondering like why things aren't working out for you, why you're so cold and unhappy and unlikable. Repeating this cycle seems actually normal to you, but the difficult part is becoming different. That's the challenge. When I think about shadow work, for a long time, I was always under the impression that shadow work was just, working on yourself. growing, evolving, getting better. And truth is, it's a little bit more deeper than that. It's a little bit more under the surface and into the mindset and the behavioral like patterns and things. I think that sometimes a person who may always be like a negative person sometimes may not even realize that they are being negative, and then they wonder why, like, why aren't they likable? So that's what I mean by like be a little bit deeper into things. And the challenge for that person becomes, okay, how do you flip the switch? How do you become better? Not better at complaining, but better at, seeing the other side of things, the brighter side, that the grass is always greener on the other side per se, but yet it's always greener where you water it. Shadow work is not just about growing, but it's about being very much aware and wanting to unlearn things so that you can relearn them so that it's beneficial to you, so it works in your favor, and eventually everything around you starts changing as well, hoping for the better. Shadow work is important. It is a start in being aware. That's like the first process of it, is pretty much like catching yourself, ultimately like catching yourself in a sense of, why are you this way? Or why are you doing things this way? Or why by default you go this way? I think you have to kind of uncover the reasoning behind these behaviors and mindset to then ultimately be able to shake it off and be like, okay, now that I know better, let me actually do better. And that's a major part in shadow work and in shifting your mindset, being aware of it, catching yourself and identifying like, why are you this way, to then doing things along the way to make it better. It definitely helps in peeling off like negative traits about you. That's the goal here, so that you can overcome any like self negativity or parts of you that you've always wanted to work on. Shadow work allows you to implement that, and it's for yourself, not for anyone else, but necessarily for yourself, because ultimately you live for yourself. It ought to be worth the while on how you live it. In this case, when you do the shadow work, you take on like being quote unquote like the bigger person, because now you're in a mindset of acknowledging your feelings before actually, when that wasn't the case. Before it was just like, this is how you are by default. This is you're prone to do this, and these are your behaviors. With shadow work, you're pretty much like putting on like your thinking cap, your big girl pants, in a sense, trying to actually implement the work, because you are aware and you're catching yourself. You're trying not to fall back into those behavioral patterns.
And this is where we have to take a step back sometimes and realize our adult version of ourselves and why we might say things the way we say them, or why we get triggered by certain things. And that's because your shadow side needs to heal. And by, getting triggered, or by you yourself or someone else reflecting their negative side to you, or you to them, is another self-awareness that we need to be mindful of. And a little bit on shadow work. Shadow work means living within your authentic truth, even if sometimes the people that are closest to you don't agree. Adulting, my friends, is not easy. And we've also discussed these topics on previous episodes. If you guys want to check out the rest of our podcast, we talk about adulting, spiritual awakenings, and these are all topics that kind of fall under the same umbrella. If you would like to check out those, feel free to scroll through our podcast here on YouTube as we discuss these topics further. This is something I just wanted to bring to light in terms of shadow work.
Why is doing shadow work important?
So why is doing shadow work important? I want to acknowledge that society conditions us to focus only on the positive too much sometimes. And in the rush of the world that we live in, it is important to stop and acknowledge our true selves. And that comes with a deep-rooted version of our own self we do not like. We do not, always have to wear this mask. We are multifaceted beings with a past that helps shape our present and work towards our future. Sometimes that requires us to go into the realms of repressed traumas. Shadow work is important, and acknowledging it more so, it's saying, hey, I'm ready to show up for myself, even if it's going to take us back to where everything rooted from. And if you think about it, shadow work is a form of self-love. Self-love does not only mean the good parts of yourself, it also is a reflection of going deep into the parts of ourselves that we have to acknowledge why we don't like them or sit with our shadow. Because if we ignore our shadow for too long, it can come out and about in ways in the relationships we have with other people. Shadow work calls us out on why certain behaviors or triggers pop up from time to time. When it does, this gives us access to aim to be our best selves. It's also important because by not giving a so-and-so hug to our shadow, we can sometimes be in an auto survival mode, quote unquote. And like other topics that we spoke on, shadow work is a process. It's not a one-time fix. So I know, Jennifer, you wanted to add more on the reasons why shadow work is important. So I want to hear your side of it too.
Shadow work is definitely something that I recommend for people to look into. It doesn't hurt to try. It's to help you better understand, once again, quote unquote, the unlikable side of you. Everyone has, some type of like a yin yang, like they're good and bad. Everyone has that than others. Some more like, out there. Some are just, on a mild basis. However, the shadow work helps because it allows you to recognize your triggers so that you don't fall back into this cycle of going back into like this dark place, negative place. It helps you learn the lessons when you apply the shadow work. A way that can be of assistance is seeking professional therapy, or even other alternative ways like your favorite hobbies and places and people that help, bring the light that you possess within you outwardly. Once again, shadow work is more focused on the negative aspects of who we are and how we can turn that around. It's not necessarily just trying to grow or, evolve and be a better person, but mainly altering those bad behaviors to something better and beneficial to you. I think it's important. I think people ought to look into it. It can help you unlearn these behaviors and replace it with something that's even better, that brings out the best version of you. Do the shadow work, guys.
There's a video that I sent you earlier on TikTok about the page is called Momentary Existentialism. And I believe one of the things that popped out in that video and really spoke to me on many levels was that the person that created the video said that pain demands to be felt. And that hits on so many volumes when it comes to shadow work, because again, if you don't do it, if you keep repressing that pain, eventually it's going to unfortunately pass on to the next generation if you do not have a reflection of it at all. This is a podcast where we have these conversations that, again, we don't talk about this often within our own households. And we wanted to just share with everybody the importance of understanding yourself on deeper levels, growing about in many ways to become, I don't even want to say like the healed version of yourself, because healing is not a one-time thing. I feel like it can be a continuous thing because there can always be fragments of that. Even if you are no longer triggered by something, it's necessary work for overall movement to the next phase of your journey, I think.
Healing is definitely not a one-time process, one and done kind of deal. It's not, and neither is shadow work. You know,
Mhm.
it's like you know a certain language and you've been speaking it your whole life to then ultimately try to learn a whole new one, and now you're like already 50, 60 years old. You're like, oh my God, where do I start? Where do I begin? This is scary. It is a scary territory, but nonetheless, the lessons that come with everything is what life's all about. So I do say, do the shadow work. Know that it's
Mhm.
not a one-time deal. See how helpful it can be to you. It doesn't hurt to try.
Ways to do shadow work. Hey guys, so we just wanted to touch up on ways to do shadow work here on Presente. So, a couple of ways that you can do shadow work. I would say the first one and the most important one is to catch yourself. What I mean here is to take a step back and recognize that you yourself are off balance. And then you have to ask yourself, why did I say the thing that I said? It is important to be aware and say, hey, I have to work on this part of myself, because chances are that you could be reflecting yourself onto other people and it has nothing to do with them. And it's just, it could be a reflection on your end. The second one, I think that is important as well, is to honor your feelings. Recognize it's okay not to be okay. We cannot always be on 100% battery charge. Some days we're going to be 1%, some days we're going to be completely depleted. I want you to know that you can cry, you can get angry. We are human. And honestly, if you look at it, vulnerability is a beautiful thing, because this moment right here is what gives us a chance to breathe. Another thing is, I need you to believe that you are worthy. Believe that you are worthy, because when you find the love within yourself first, when we begin to understand how we can love ourselves, it helps us to improve our relationships with other people. Find the love within. Something else is some little homework I want you to do is to identify unhelpful patterns or behaviors. Identify the things that you may repeat that are not helping you further grow or blossom. So I just want to reiterate again on what Jennifer said earlier about her shadow work experiences, where she was talking about how certain things that you say to yourself are not unhelpful, or always being pessimistic about certain things, or always complaining about certain things. It's like, what are you? Okay, so yes, it's good to express those feelings, but what are we going to do about it? You know what I'm saying? Something else, or another example is thoughts like, I'm not good enough. We have to tell ourselves from now on that yes, you are good enough, because the 1% that you do each and every day adds up and counts for the overall future version of yourself you are creating. And I also want to say something about this part, that you're not good enough. Society has a formula of the way we should live, the way we should be, the way we should look. No, we need to break those chains and start identifying new ways of how we are good enough, by the style that we choose to be in, by being comfortable within our own skin, by choosing something that we do out of love, by recognizing, hey, there are days that I need to rest and I'm still good enough. So identifying those unhelpful patterns that society placed on us is another great way to do shadow work. And again, things that you may repeat to yourself is another way to kind of goes back to the first part of, catching yourself. And then of course, there's also journaling, which we spoke about, or Jennifer spoke about in the last episode that came out on vision boards and journaling, where she touched bases on keeping a personal record, putting all of your feelings on a page. Sometimes by doing that, we can release so much tension that we have inside and built inside ourselves. Another way to, of course, do shadow work is by going to therapy. Listen to me. Therapy is important. There's no shame in going to therapy. I know some people feel a certain way about it, but listen, if you're going to keep being closed minded about therapy or about talking to someone about things that are particularly not benefiting your life, then I need you to change that mindset and to be open to it, because sometimes what somebody else tells you about yourself or that you might yourself might not be aware of, you can easily in a safe space talk about it with somebody else. I think it's helpful to break down your feelings. And of course, there are the other episodes we spoke about here on Presente, which are breaking generational cycles, the topic on adulting and how we are all adulting and processing what it means to live in the world that we live in.
Since we started this podcast, Presente, at the end of 2023, we've come to elaborate what it is to express yourself, what it is to, have an open mind, be present and mindful and intentional in the things you do and the things you say and the life you want to live. Inner child healing and shadow work comes at a right time to pretty much like grab a hold of the previous topics: adulting, breaking generational curses, and there was one more we did, which was spiritual awakening. And I think that the shadow work and inner child healing is like the cherry on top, because it's really, you knowing these things about your upbringing or the world you live in. You know that being an adult is difficult. It's challenging, and we can go on further detail about all of this all over again. But all of these other episodes that we've rolled out ultimately to now is what we're trying to focus on for our listeners and ourselves, because we are work in progresses, but just to bring out the best version of you, because there will always be adulting. There will always be, generational trauma and curses and a debate. It will always be up for debate. But now you actually have a chance to work on yourself. And with this episode, we just want to let people know that it is totally fine and okay and should be spoken about when it comes to working on yourself. If you need to unplug from certain outings or social media, then so be it, because your mental health matters and your healing does too. So we just want to let you guys know that there's no specific time in which you have to do shadow work or anything like that, but to be in tune with your inner child is totally acceptable. It's totally fine, and healing is gonna come along with that, but you have to apply the work and be aware of it all. I'll leave you with that. Sincerely Sicily is a coming-of-age children's novel about Panamanian Afro-Latina Sicily Jordan. She's the new 6th grader at her new school. This is a story about overcoming prejudice and using the power of creativity and communication to take back her pride, all while rocking her braids.
Hi, my name is Tamika Burgess, and I am Presente.
Hello, Tamika. Welcome to Presente. For those who are tuning in, this is season 2, episode 3, where we are highlighting inner child healing and shadow work. We have a very special guest here today, Tamika Burgess, author of Sincerely Sicily. So happy to have you on Presente. I am so proud of you for all the efforts you've put into your new book. A little bit on the backside for people to know, Tamika and I know each other from almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
You remember when we met, we were working for the Board of Ed with children, and you telling me like, you enjoy writing and that you're going to go to California and that you used to live out there. And it was about that time that you had to go back there to actually make this happen. So super proud to see everything come into fruition. Excited to have you here and know a little bit more about your book and where things are today. And and have your thoughts on this topic that we are speaking on with inner child healing and shadow work. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime, anytime. For starters, tell us a little bit about your journey, a little bit about your background.
So, background, my parents are born and raised in Panama. I'm born and raised in California. After graduating college, I worked a little bit in PR and decided I hate this and wanted a change. So I went to New York and started my writing career, just taking classes here and there, dabbling in it as a hobby. I started working with children. And like Jennifer said, that's how we met. The writing thing, I was doing some freelance writing for different websites, but it always felt like, oh, I want to do this, but I didn't really know how. And I think being in New York, it gave me that kind of like hustler's mentality, I would say, since New York is so fast paced and the people I was meeting, everybody was like, yeah, I'm doing this, but I really want to do this type of thing. So it gave me that push. And then when I moved back to California, the book, Sincerely Sicily, that's out now, was sort of done. And I was like, I need to finish this and at least try. So I spent a couple years with it, just, like, let me polish this up, see if I have a story and just try. And then from there, I went through the agent process, got an agent, and she got it to a publisher, and then it came out. I always lose track of time. This time last year, because I'm so used to saying, oh, earlier this year, but we're a whole year now. So at the beginning of 2023, it was released. So it was literally like a 10-year process with the book.
I was literally thinking about this yesterday, like, wow, 10 years already. I've known Tamika 10 years ago, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like it was just yesterday, at least for me. And I do recall our conversations back then, your interest in writing, and to know that it takes time, but you did it, girl. Like, you did it. And I'm so happy because I have my copy right here.
Oh, yay.
Absolutely, I do. I love to support those, especially that I know, because, support goes a long way. And this is definitely something to be super proud of. I can say I know an author myself, so that's pretty dope. It's pretty dope. Absolutely. I have your book here and I haven't finished it completely, but in reading it, oh my God, I absolutely love your representation of Spanish culture, going into a little bit more into the Panamanian culture, which I'm not too familiar about. So that was very pleasant to read on. I might add that it was like a visual reading for me. Like reading it and the way you described the characters and the scenery, everything, it was like, whoa, I can picture myself there. So I really like that. I enjoyed reading this book. I've shared it with my stepdaughter. She's 10 years old, about to soon be a middle schooler. So this was a really nice way to kind of start a new read and conversation with her. So thank you. It's a really nice read. I recommend, not just for middle schoolers, parents, adults. Please take a look at it. You'll find some really nice representation there, as well as family, like what family goes through. It's just so relatable.
Yeah. No, it was what do they say, a labor of love, I guess, because it was frustrating, and then all the revisions and stuff that you go through. But now to look at it, I'm like, wow, I did that. I'm glad to hear you say that it's just not for kids, because that's something I tell people, and sometimes I feel weird about it because I'm like, they're probably think, oh, just I want you to buy my book. But it really is like anybody can read it and take something from it. And that was really important for me to do, because I didn't want it to just be like, oh, it's a little kid book, let me just buy it for such and such. It's like, no, but you can read it too and take from it as an adult. And that was something too, when I presented it to my agent, she was like, I love that I can read it and get something out of it. And it just doesn't have to be, oh, you're Panamanian, so you can relate. Like, there's elements of the story that all walks of life can, take from. So I'm glad that you felt that way too.
I definitely picked up on it not just being for middle school, not middle schoolers, but I say that because of the character, but not just for kids. I highly recommend for adults. It's like a two-way street. You get both perspectives, from a children's perspective as well as an adult, and what her family and those she lives with. So it was it's it's good. I'm glad you made that very clear, because I noticed it immediately, like, oh, this isn't just for kids.
Yeah.
So very nice body of work.
Yeah.
As a children's book author, your storybook exemplifies good character. It's relatable with many experiences and a positive message, a really nice positive tone to it. I'm very excited. Jissela is excited to have you here on Presente. What led to the creation of Sincerely Sicily?
So it started out just as, well, let me go back. So growing up here in California, obviously I'm a presenting black girl. But so when people heard my mom, specifically her accent, that's when I got questions of, what are you? So, and then, both sides of my family is from Panama. So, my parents are from Panama, and I left it alone. At a young age, that worked. But as I got older, that's when the questions started to come.
Mhm.
It was, well, what are you? Well, how are they from Panama, but you guys are Black? And, your family speaks Spanish. And then here being California, the first assumption is Mexican. So then it was like, oh, are you Mexican? And do you speak Panamanian? Like just random questions, or Panama, Florida. So there were always a lot of questions, and that always stuck with me. And back then I didn't know how do I respond to people? So my mom would just be like, well, tell them you're a Black Panamanian. For her, it wasn't a big deal. But for me, it was, yeah, I could tell them that, but they still don't get it, because it's not New York where, where you meet people from several different countries. Like I said, it's a lot of Mexico here. So growing up, that really stayed with me. And I experienced it a lot actually in college. That's where I got a lot of pushback. Yeah. And it was like, no, that's not true. And are you sure? Like a lot of people questioning as if I was lying about it. Right. I think that has always just been like a little thing in me, is like, I want to share that in a story. And I knew I wanted to present it to a younger age, just because I felt like when you're younger, you're more accepting of information. And that brought me back to that experience in college where they were like, no, that's not true. But it's like, I thought about when I was younger, and I would tell people, my family's from Panama. I was like, oh, okay. And, we moved on. So when I thought about writing a book, I actually wanted to do a picture book. And, just like a quick little thing of like, oh, this is Sicily. She's learning about her culture, and that was it. But when I started, there was so much stuff that I wanted to include that I was like, there's no way I could do a picture book. A picture book nowadays is like 500 words. Could have never done that. And so I just, I went to I thought about it, and I was like, well, I can make her a little older. And I settled on middle school because, again, I felt like you're at that age where you start to question things, meeting people. You start to think, your mind is expanding, you're growing, even in school, what you're learning about in terms of history. So I thought that was a better fit for the character and presenting this information. And then two, it's like a transition period for yourself. So in the story, Sicily starts to question, well, how am I a Black Panamanian? How is this even possible? So in the story, she goes through her self-discovery journey of, understanding that, asking questions, doing research, talking to her family. And so, yeah, all of that, the whole book basically stems from those specific experiences in my life. And then me, adding the fiction element to it. A lot of the time, like I hesitate saying, oh, it's loosely based, because then people think like everything that happened in the book is my experience. And I'm like, no, it's just, those specific things of being questioned about my race and culture. And that was kind of like the driving force for this story. So the whole thing pretty much stems from my experiences growing up in like a non-diverse area of California. Yeah.
I think education is elevation. And what you're doing is really empowering for others to learn about. Like Jennifer was saying, this is for everybody, adults, children. And like you do say, yes, children are very accepting and very open to understanding others. And I feel like this is a great way for them to get to dive a little deeper into these conversations that are so important, especially in the Latin community.
Yeah.
Where colorism unfortunately does exist. And I feel like this is really great to bring to light for other people. So moving into question number 2, the part where Sicily's parents wanted her to focus more on education was very relatable. And this stems from past generational cycles of parents who immigrated to the United States. Besides the parents, are there any other members of the Jordan family generational breakers? And will Sicily break any generational curses in the future?
I think in the it's probably Sicily, since it's her story. She'll be the one. Like, to give a little bit of a plot line away, Sicily's grandmother doesn't like her hair in braids. And throughout this, she learned her grandmother just grew up in a time in Panama where you didn't wear your hair like that. You were seen as ghetto. It wasn't professional. I remember talking to my mom about it, and she told me like women with kinky, coily hair, if they worked in the bank or the store, they had them like work in the back just because they weren't a presenting image of, you know, I guess what society felt they should look like. Gave that stuff to the grandmother. And then so Cicely just wearing her hair in braids is breaking that cycle, right? And so, and then having that conversation with her grandmother to be like, well, what is the problem with my hair being like this? You know, she likes it. In the story, she's learning how to braid her own hair through speaking to her aunt. She gets empowerment about it. And so it's this whole thing of like, well, why? What is the problem here? So I think that specifically is one way you see Cicely breaking that generational thing within her family, whereas it kind of skipped over with her dad and that generation, her parents' generation. But then it comes to her and she's like resisting it, whereas maybe the generation before her was just like, oh, okay, whatever about it. And she's like, well, no, I want to do this. Why not? And even the whole thing of dealing with her grandmother, she holds in her feelings because she wants to be respectful, right? You know, we always grow up with respect your grandma, don't speak to them this way. She finds a way to be respectful, but get her voice across to her grandmother and have a conversation about what her grandmother said to her and how that made her feel. So I think those two specific things come to mind in terms of how she's doing that within her family.
I noticed from the beginning the relationship she has with her grandmother, and yes, the honor and respect.
Mm-hmm.
She looks up to her, and they have it seems like they also have like this really nice friendship. You know, it's not just, you're the grandmother, I'm the granddaughter. And I love how you mentioned about the hairstyles, because even in little ways like that, it really speaks volumes. It really breaks down doors and certain stereotypes, you know, just
beauty
like
standards
in
too.
beauty standards. Yeah, like just, you know, you should honor and embrace, you know, your beauty from hair to from head to toe. For our listeners out there, people think that sometimes when you're breaking a generational curse, it has to be like, you know, out of this world, something completely, you know, like tremendous. But no, it's even something on a smaller factor that you want to, you know, speak up on and make a difference in. So I really admire that about Cicely, that as young as she is, she has a very good head on her shoulders and is strong-minded. Her personality, I would say, is also relatable to many children in today's society, where they're just like, you know, this is who I am, and this is what I do, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, and they speak up for themselves. So I really like the representation that you put throughout this entire book. And Cicely, you know, you go, girl.
Strong-minded, will-powered. I love it. So question 3 is, what is your best advice for someone channeling their inner child healing?
I think about Cicely with this, right? And how she had the element of her journal. In the story, it's told that her grandpa gave it to her because he saw something in her, but she didn't know what to use it for. And then when this whole thing of understanding her culture came about, that's what she ended up using it for, right? As a learning tool. And doing so, that helped her to unlock different things to understand herself, right? But she's doing this as a child. So I think back to like as an adult, or I think about now as an adult, like how journaling can also help with that. But one thing I would say too is therapy, in terms of you go into therapy like, well, I want to talk about this is my issue. And then in talking about those things, a therapist might ask you one question that takes you somewhere else. And you're like, oh, I didn't even think that was something I needed to discuss or work through, or that was even an issue. Might be something you suppressed or put in the back of your mind. So I think I would have to say therapy is the one, just because you're going to get those questions that you never thought to ask yourself, right? Or just, come up with things that you didn't think was an issue, but that could be the main issue that's leading to things that you think are the issue in your life as an adult. So I think I would have to say, in terms of your looking back at your childhood history,
Yeah.
I would think therapy, just because they're going to bring up things that, like I said, you're not even thinking, not even on your radar anymore. And you're thinking, oh, that's not an issue, when it's, it actually still is.
Yeah, when you're a child, children all have different perspectives and points growing as as they get older. And there are certain points within a child that can be so heavy and traumatic for them. They repress the feelings, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And then you don't start to realize how much you need to unfold as you get older,
Yeah.
and go back to that time where you were a child and the world inside you was so free to explore, to do whatever it was before society had anything to say about something.
Yeah.
So I think that those elements are super important. And yes, therapy is great for that. And so is, hey, like going back to things and being like, hey, what were those things that I enjoyed as a child? Like you were talking about creative writing. And we actually spoke about that in our last episode. Jennifer touched up on journaling, where you put your ideas onto paper, and that is a form of art, a form of expression. So the fact that you gave those elements to Sicily is really great, and I love that. Thank you for creating such a very empowering character.
I love it too. In hearing you say journaling and therapy, and just once again as an adult looking back at the things that as a kid you enjoyed, I always say continue to do that, like there's no cutoff age. Like I'm not gonna say exactly how old I am, but I personally, I would love a coloring book. I love a good journal. I love playing board games and
Yes.
being, with the family. Like I will do that any day, opposed to like having to, just not do anything or go to work. But I definitely enjoy that. I love how you mentioned that Sicily and her journal, and how important is writing to Sicily and to you.
For Sicily, it's everything. It's something she's growing into. Like I said, that her father gave her the journal. She didn't know exactly what to do with it at the time, so she kind of just put it in a drawer and left it. And then it wasn't until all these things started to come up where she was like, I can use that to help me basically write out everything I'm learning and let it be this thing that I always have, right? And so who knows, later in Cicily's life, she might change and use her journal for her daily thoughts as opposed to stuff that's just culturally, right? So at this specific point in her life, it is important because that's where she writes everything in terms of her self-discovery journey. For myself, I found that writing Sincerely Sicily, it was therapeutic in a way in terms of using my experiences of people questioning my culture. And then it's just grown into this thing of, I have to do it, right? Like, I know we'll talk about this later, but with my second book, we're in the midst of the last part of revisions for it. And so everything has been like so fast paced with it. So when I turned in my first round of edits a few weeks ago, I had been doing it for the last month. And so after I turned it in, I just had so much free time. I was like, this is weird. Like, I feel like I should be writing or doing something. So I'm like, should I start a new story? And then they came back with more edits. So now I'm back in it. And I'm like, this feels, even though it's a lot of work and I really have to prioritize my time with also having a full-time job with it. But it's like, I don't know, the chaos of it feels like this is what I should be doing with my time, right? It should be used to writing and developing these characters and making readers be able to see them, like you mentioned, Jennifer. And so I don't really know how to put it into words, but it feels right. It feels like what I should be doing. So it's very important to me, I should say, to answer your question.
I think your soul is aligning to your heart and your creativity, your passions. That's what I think your purpose, it's your soul aligning. I think that's what it all means.
Yeah.
So question 5 is more of a fun question. Have you visited Panama? And any recommendations of where to go for our listeners, national foods to eat, the best time to travel? I've heard Panama is a very beautiful country in Centro America. Being my mother is also from Centro America. My mother is from Honduras.
Okay, nice. So off the top, the canal, I would have to say, like, sometime when I was in high school, we did a family reunion in Panama, and we got on a boat and went through the canal, not the whole thing because it takes a really long time, but we went from like one point to another. So just having that experience of seeing what it actually does, like lowering the ship down and, getting you to the sea level of the other sea, and then just actually seeing like this thing connects one body of water to the other, it's like a whole thing of putting a visual to, what we know of it to do. And even if you can't do that, they do have like a museum area at one of the sections of the locks where you can go and see, and you can watch boats go through it too. So that's definitely number one. There's another area called the Causeway. It's like a strip of land that goes out into the Pacific. That's very touristy, restaurants. You can go hiking, bike riding. And then two, you just see people like, they'll just take food and hang out there, right? Because you're right on the water. I don't know if they have this now, but last time I went, they had a party bus where it takes you to different tourist parts, but you can drink and play music. And it's like there's like lights on it. The whole side of the bus is open. So it's like a whole little nighttime thing.
I love that.
Yeah. The food, I mean, literally anything is good. Like they have they have chilies and, but I would recommend find those hole in the wall, air quote, places to just try, the seafood, obviously, being surrounded with, by the oceans, you get fresh seafood. From what I hear now, they're calling Panama like the Dubai of Central America, right? So you get the tall skyscrapers, there's like the rooftop element. So, I mean, honestly, whatever you're trying to go there for, I think you can find it. There's the resort, so you could do the snorkeling and the parasailing, so it's like whatever you want to do, you can basically find it. The rainforests are there. Panama has a lot of different species of butterflies, right? The abundance of the butterfly. So you see lots of different animal species and insect species. So there are parts of the different rainforests that you can go and walk through. I would also recommend going to Old Panama, where you see the ruins of the old country before it became what it is today. There's so much. I tried to think about this in advance. I'm sure I'm going to think of a million things after we're done. Yeah, off the top, for sure, the canal, the causeway, the downtown area. There's also areas too where you'll see the indigenous, the Kuna Indians. They make the molas. You can, see them, and they're like making them, and you can purchase them. So there's like really a lot of different things that you can go and see and try and do in Panama. It just has to, based on what you want to do, right? What you want to see when you go there.
Yeah, we're going to need a full itinerary for that.
I have to put like a lot of time into it. I've had different friends ask me, and I'm like, I need time. I got to think about this. And then it's been about, I haven't been since 2014. So I'm sure there's, way more that I'm missing now, but yeah.
It sounds so exciting.
It does. You had me at the canal and the ocean and by the water, bring your food. You could have food. I love the summer. I love the sun and the water.
Same.
Oh, and one thing too, you asked about the weather. So Panama has only 2 seasons. It's either dry or rainy. Right now is the dry, like January to May, you're good. And then after that, you get the raining season where it's still humid the whole time. It's still humid, but you'll get like the downpours of the rain. Because I remember one time we went in August and literally every day at the same time you get a downpour of rain and then it goes away, and then the next day is a down, and that's, they call that the rainy season.
I like that too, though.
Right, so it's, so
I
you
like
know, you know it's going to be hot regardless. It's going to be hot and humid, but you'll get a little bit of a breeze with the rain during those months, and then other than that it's just consistently just hot and humid.
It's a vibe. I'm there. Hey.
Me too. Me too. I just did like a mind travel right now while you were explaining Panama to me, and hopefully it's on, one on my bucket list. One day, 1 year, I'll be able to go and just
Yeah,
go.
beautiful, beautiful. And one thing too I'll add is Panama is, embrace for a long time, from what I understand, is the blackness of the country wasn't always acknowledged, right? Because you, with the canal, you have the Caribbean and the black workers who came over, the railroad and stuff like that. So there's a lot of food-wise, a lot of like African Caribbean restaurants opening too. So where you get that element of the food. I just like, watching different things on YouTube. I see there's a guy that I follow that goes to different countries and tries the food. And he went to a few restaurants and I was like, oh, okay, wow, this is like a thing now. Like they're starting to embrace and acknowledge the Black representation, the Caribbean representation, and the, what's the word? Just the contribution to the country that that Black people have made. So that's very nice to see. Like I heard that there's a museum now acknowledging it. And so just different contributions to the country as a whole. So I think, in them starting to do that, you see, like I mentioned, the food, the museums, just different things that you can see too. So I'm excited to go back and see those things.
Back to your book. I love how you bring your readers to this glossary of Spanish Panamanian, because it's like, you had fun with it. It was very playful. One thing that I like is how you did the translations from Spanish to English. You actually incorporated a lot of Spanish words throughout the book, giving it like a Spanglish kind of feel to it. So I thought that was really nice. It put a smile to my face just as I was reading things. You list a lot of foods here as well that you can find in Panama. It's nice to have it at hand and know, like, for someone who wants to visit or is curious, they have this to go back to, the book, Sincerely Sicily. Would you happen to I know you mentioned that you're working on your second book. When is that coming soon? And as far as Sincerely Sicily, where can our listeners find your book?
Sincerely Sicily is anywhere you can buy a book. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart. You can even check your local independent bookstores. If not, they could definitely order it and have it, sent to you. So my second book is like, this interview is right on time because we're just finalizing things. The title of it is called Danila Was Here. It is about a boy growing up in 1990 in Panama when the U.S. invaded the country to get Noriega out. So this is a historical fiction book. The story is set on a historical event, the invasion of the country, and then around it is his fictional life, right? So he lives in the neighborhood where Noriega's headquarters was, where the U.S. basically bombed it, and then his neighborhood around it. So this story chronicles his PTSD that happens, with being there that day that happened. And then it takes on what happens in his life after that. I don't know how much I want to give away in terms of what happens next, because we're still finalizing how I'm going to summarize this when I speak to people. But it's, like I said, it's a historical fiction set in 1990 when the U.S. invaded Panama. It is probably going to come out January or February of next year. So we're working on what the cover is going to look like right now, what he will look like on the cover. I think I'm in my last round of revisions for it, just tightening up little things here and there throughout the story. But as of now, that's what we're doing. So I think like in the next couple months, we should have our cover finalized. So I'll share that online and in my newsletter and stuff. And then just, different tidbits about the character, just start the rollout soon. And then pre-orders will start soon. So I'll go through the whole process of like what I did for Sicily.
Nice. I like that. I like that it's a different character, even though I thought you were gonna do more like a sequel to Sicily or something. But I'm sure that will be somewhere down the line. This sounds like a very exciting book to read as well. Your second book coming up. One thing I definitely want to congratulate you because I know that Sincerely Sicily just made its 1-year anniversary. So that's a very big deal. That's major. Continue to do what you do best. Continue to write, continue to show representation. We need people like you to continue to tell the story and pay it forward. Bravo to you. I'm super proud of you. I'm happy to know you. I'm happy you're on Presente. Please let us know, our listeners, where they can find you. I know you said you have a newsletter and you have an Instagram. So if you want to just shout that out, we'll also make sure we tag that when we release this episode.
Yeah. So my website is just my name, TamikaBurgess.com. And then all my socials is Tameeksb. It's TAMEEKSB. Twitter, I guess X now, Insta, and I do a little bit of TikTok. I'm on there mostly just browsing, but I don't really post too much. And then through my website, that's where people can subscribe to the newsletter. And that's probably where first, like, if you're really interested in the second book, that's where I'll release like a lot of that stuff first before I go to social media with it. And yeah, so basically, if you go to my website, you're able to find, it links to all the ways you can find me. I have all the social stuff, the newsletter, all of that stuff is there.
Thank you. Sounds good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to have met you today. This was really exciting to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for talking about your book. I feel like you have made very real, raw characters and raw settings and feelings. And I feel in my soul that, these books, especially the next one that's coming out, could even be like a short film. I feel that would be really cool to see.
Yes.
I think, to have that, since you're talking about Noriega and what happened in the 90s. I feel like that could be maybe something, if anybody directors are listening to this podcast, that could be so cool to come out. But I'm really glad to have met you, and thank you for being here. And thank you for sharing your work. Very important. Very, very important.
Thank you so much. I just felt, and I know we're closing, but I just wanted to say, like, I just felt like growing up, I never saw myself fully represented, whether it was race or culturally. And then specifically Panama, anything, I didn't see it. So I just kind of feel like, well, this is my lane. So let me stay in it and, do what I do. So thank you both for having me. I really enjoyed this opportunity to connect. And in all the interviews that I've done in the past year about the book, I've never really talked about healing and how that relates to Sicily and the writing. And I never really made that connection. So thank you guys for, bringing that up. So, because it made me think about like, oh yeah, she does kind of, get into that. And I might, as an adult, Sicily might decide, oh, I should continue with this. And whereas young readers might be like, oh, okay, that's something I can do too. So thank you both for this opportunity and your well thought out questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tamika. It's been a pleasure to speak with you and have you on Presente. Continue to write and leave your imprint on the world. I think many people are going to be very pleased to read Sincerely Sicily, as well as the other books you have coming for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Tamika Burgess, and I am Presente.
And lastly, I have to make a special announcement to my co-host and friend, Jissela Murillo. Happy birthday. We appreciate you. This show wouldn't be what it is without you and your magic. I wish you a very special happy birthday. Enjoy, stay blessed, stay beautiful, and thank you.